All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Bright Brainz. Joining me today is Kelly Catlin, the author of Kurt Cobain Forever in Bloom, a powerful new book that sheds light on the humanity, creativity, and enduring legacy of the legendary Nirvana frontman. Launching on what would have been Kurt Cobain's 58th birthday, Kelly's work offers an intimate and refreshing perspective on his life, going beyond the tortured artist narrative to reveal the compassionate father, friend, and advocate for justice. I'm excited to dive into her journey writing this book and explore what she discovered about one of music's most iconic figures. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Same. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to write about Kurt Cobain.
Sure. So I'm a former school teacher. I used to be a special ed teacher, and when I became a mom, I left, and now I'm a homeschooling mom, and I love it. But in 2017, this was a month after my wedding, we did lose a family member, Walter, to suicide, and that really I don't want to say change the way I look at mental health because I've always felt that we need to have more awareness and have these, stigma-free conversations about suicide and mental health. But that definitely affected me on a personal level where I wanted to do something more. And that was kind of, I guess, the impetus, for writing the book. So, when I left to be a stay-at-home mom, I still wanted to work, so I started writing, and I write for different outlets, and one of them is an online music publication. And I started connecting with different indie artists to ask them questions about their music, and there was kind of this theme that got brought up, and it was Kurt Cobain. And it was his impact and his influence on these indie artists. And it was never anything negative or, depressed that you would hear people say. It was always very positive things about how, maybe somebody was, struggling with drug use, or maybe somebody was battling depression, or somebody was bullied in their youth. All things I'm familiar with, as a teacher. And to hear these artists, these people say that Kurt Cobain's message, Kurt Cobain's music really pulled them out of it, spoke to me. And I was home one day. I think I was, baking cookies with my little one, and the young man across the street from us was blasting Nirvana. So I was outside a little bit later, and I was like, he's much younger than me. And I said, "You guys still listen to this?" He's like, "Oh yeah, Nirvana's huge." And that made me want to start listening to Nirvana again, which then goes and trips, the Google algorithm, and Kurt Cobain starts coming up in my newsfeed. And everything was so depressed that I read about him. And I started thinking of Walter, my loved one who passed from suicide. And I thought, how terrible that somebody's depression should completely eclipse all the happiness or all the good they did. So I started reading and learning more about Kurt Cobain's life, and I learned that he was this huge champion for the marginalized. He was this vocal feminist because I came into this not knowing much about Nirvana. This wasn't like I was some diehard fan and I wanted to write a book about my favorite musician. I really didn't know anything about him or the band. I just knew that Cobain's suicide was one of the most well-known suicides of the 20th century, and that you have all these young people looking up to him, and that I felt the narrative surrounding his death and his depression really did people a disservice. So I wanted to set out on my own journey to learn more about him. And that was basically the book. What resulted was 2 years working with his friends, members of the Seattle music community, Nirvana's former management, record, label executives, recording engineers, just some incredible people who really helped me dismantle this myth that he was just, depressed, because Kurt Cobain really was so much more. So that was the whole everything that made me want to do the book, and yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. So much about Kurt Cobain, whatever you read about him, it's always about his tragic end and his tortured soul. How did
Always.
you approach crafting a narrative that goes beyond the whole tortured artist stereotype?
The first thing I did was I figured that I needed to kind of like this is going to be my thesis statement. This is going to be what the book is about. And if there's one question I can ask everybody, what is it going to be? Now this is a big book. It's 500 pages, but it's not like other books that might be half the size of it that have 400 interviews. And I'm not knocking that at all. This is double the size book with maybe 35 interviews. So it is a serious deep dive. Meaning that if I sat down with someone, like one interview, for example, was like 12 hours long. So I really made sure not to cut, anything if I didn't have to. But I wanted all these people to answer the same question. What was it about Kurt Cobain that was so special? Or what was it about him that stood out? And I feel that when you frame a question that way, instead of like, do you think he was, depressed from childhood? When you ask questions that elicit a more positive response, you get a more positive response. Um, that wasn't necessarily meant to, tilt the book in a way that was just positive, but there's a lot of literature out there about him, whether it's books, whether it's, articles on the internet. It doesn't matter where you read stuff. And a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it does have that very kind of maudlin, depressed vibe to it. And I figured, all those upsetting questions about his suicide, about his drug use, they've been asked before. So let's ask the questions that maybe we don't hear enough, or the questions that I would want someone to ask me about Walter. And that was what I did. I went into it. I kind of, prefaced it with everybody who's in the book beforehand. Look, this is a positive book. This isn't an autopsy of somebody's, death. This is a celebration of life. This is reminding people why Kurt Cobain is, the inspiration we need to see in the world, the little bit of good that was there 30, 30 plus years ago. And I think when you frame things that way and you let people know this stuff going into it, they're more excited to share with you the happy details than to just focus on depression, because the man was depressed, and you can't negate that, and you can't write a book like this and gloss over that. But there were plenty of other moments in, times where he was happy that people were eager to share with me, that I think gets left out of history. So
How did you go about reaching out to his friends and family to get those interviews? Because I imagine, you know, people who knew him, they're probably like, "Oh, great, here's another
oh
reporter or
yeah,
something wanted to talk to me about Kurt." So
100%.
how'd you do that?
Absolutely. So like I tell people, like, so I came into this with zero industry connections. I literally special ed teacher, stay-at-home mom, homeschooling mom, bake in my spare time, not going to concerts in my spare time. I'm on the opposite side of the country from Seattle, so this was tough. Um, Basically, I want to say one of the first people I spoke with was Gary Lee Conner, from the Screaming Trees. And I had sent him an email, and I told him about this project that I wanted to do. I said, look, I said, I lost somebody very important to me. I told him about Walter. I said, the suicide. I said, I want to write something about Kurt Cobain that makes people look at him differently. And I'm going to give, at least half my profits to charity. And that immediately got Gary's attention. He was phenomenal. We got on the phone. We talked for hours. He is, one of the nicest human beings you will ever meet. And as we were getting off the phone, he said to me, he's like, why don't you go call Kurt Danielson from the band Tad? Tad had toured with Nirvana more than any other band. He said, tell him I sent you. And it was kind of that snowball effect. It was, one person would refer me to somebody else. And then once you get like, 3 to 5 interviews under your belt, you can kind of, approach other people with that, like, hey, here's who's already trusted me. You're all in the same circle. Why don't, you reach out? I do have, I have, let's say I connected with a local record store owner in Aberdeen, Washington. They're called the Tangerine Tree. They're phenomenal. Wound up becoming basically best friends with this family that owns it, and being based in Kurt Cobain's hometown of Aberdeen, Washington. They had some connections, so they were able to put me in touch. So a lot of it was, and I'm a pretty introverted person, but a lot of it was putting myself out there, not being afraid to call people, not being afraid to share my story about Walter. And the common theme that I got from basically everybody when I wrote the book was we all agreed to do this because you told us about your experience with Walter. So, please make sure you include Walter in the book too, because so this is a traditionally published book, but I did go through some, literary agents and whatnot before I wound up doing my own thing with an independent publisher. And a lot of literary agents were very only write about Cobain, don't include, your personal story, don't include Walter in it at all. And then, like I said, it was Kurt's friends that were like, no, screw that. If that means you self-publish the book, then you self-publish the book. You include him in there. And I did. Um, and it was actually one literary agent that I connected with agreed. And he was like, no, he's like, make sure he's in there. And here's how you should include Walter in the book. So it was, I think it was just I had to open up and tell these people that knew and loved Kurt why I was doing this. I also, started doing some stuff where I hosted an online writing workshop for charity where I brought other writers in and I showed them how I wrote this book. And then I sent all the money, to the charity that I said I was going to send it to. It's actually called Camp Victory. It's in Cobain's hometown. They provide free summer camp for children who are sexual abuse survivors. Um, and then I think that kind of showed people like, okay, she's serious about what she's doing. Obviously getting a traditional publishing deal does kind of help give people that little bit of, all right, this is an above board project. I didn't work with Kurt's family in that they're not in the book, but they are aware of the book. So I didn't ever want to do anything that might make people feel uncomfortable. I kind of put the bat signal out there. I got a call from someone who represents the Cobain estate. They just asked if I could send over a book or, I'm sorry, the manuscript. This is when the book was still being written, or in editing rather, just for the family. We sent everything over and that was it. We just said, here you go. If anybody has any questions, comments, queries, doesn't like it, let us know. We never heard back. So, I mean, we did our due diligence. Um, it doesn't really speak about his family much. My thought process was this is a celebration of Kurt's life. Courtney Love and Frances Bean obviously can speak for themselves. I didn't ever want to put words into their mouths. If I do mention them at all, everything is completely respectful. But it's really just focusing on Kurt's impact on others, and it's it's tough inserting yourself into an industry that you know nothing about. And like I said, it's a lot of brutal honesty, and it was 2 years of me having to tell people I didn't know about what happened to Walter and relive that for 2 years to get people to trust me. But it's something I feel strongly about. And even though it was a challenging and at times depressing process, I think it's a very worthwhile process. The book has a big section just on mental health awareness. So I'm hoping, maybe somebody reads the book, it changes one person's life for the better. They know that there's help out there, and then I've done my job, and everything was worth it. So,
Awesome. So, what was the most surprising or moving story you uncovered while researching Cobain's life?
hmm. So, it's funny. It's not funny, not funny. It's not a surprising story because it's things you know happens. But hearing about it from a firsthand perspective, I think is what kind of really throws you for a loop. So one of Kurt's friends, Carlos Cake Nunez, he's wonderful. He's a friend of mine. He's an incredible human being. Used to, go to a lot of different Nirvana shows, and he would be backstage waiting for Kurt. And he told me this story about how Kurt's crowd surfing, and Kurt goes back and backstage, and he's visibly upset. He's missing a shoe, and he's telling Carlos how, look what they did to me. They're grabbing at me. They're grabbing at him in inappropriate places. Just things that made him feel very uncomfortable. And he said to Carlos, I can't do what I love anymore. I can't crowd surf because people were just not respectful with it anymore. And I know Kurt had talked about this. I don't think it was this particular incident, but I know he had talked about it in interviews himself. But you're reading those interviews from 30 plus years ago versus talking to a friend of his who was there and who's saying, I watched this. I remember seeing him come back from behind stage, shaken and upset about it. And you think to yourself, wow, he really got to that level of fame where it was like people were literally clawing at him and ripping at him. And you know what happens. But when you hear people talk about it behind the scenes, it's just the Kurt Cobain that I learned about was not a musician or a famous musician, should we say. The Kurt Cobain that I learned about was a friend, a father, you know what I mean? Just a caring individual. So to then go and hear how fame affected him, where he couldn't even do music the same way that he loved, it is just I don't know, eye-opening as to what I think musicians just deal with that maybe we don't realize.
How does Kurt Cobain's journey resonate with today's conversations about mental health and addiction?
I think there's, well, not so much now. It feels like we're a lot more comfortable having these honest dialogues about mental health and addiction, but definitely when he was alive, it was a lot more taboo. I was thinking about this yesterday because some people in my book said to me, there's so much more that could have been done for him that wasn't. And you think, okay, but he had been in the 12-step programs and he had been in and out of rehab, and even, the week before he took his own life, he had been, spent a couple days at the Exodus Recovery Center. So you think, okay, but people did, work to put him in rehab. But think uh, I don't think there is enough comfortable dialogue around his mental health. So much seemed to be focused on the drug use, the drug use, the drug use. Let's get him to kick, heroin. Let's the drug use, the drug use. But I mean, and this is just these are my musings. I don't think people were probably comfortable enough to discuss maybe about his depression, like, hey, what's going on? Like, why are you using drugs? We know he had these stomach issues, which were never really diagnosed. It was probably something along the lines of, irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bowel disease. Some people speculate that maybe it was, just psychosomatic. You can tell he was very, stressed out from a young age. He had a tough start to life. Um, and I just feel like we see this person who arguably, at the time was the most famous musician in the world, suffering in plain sight. And it's not like he had a happy ending. Suffering in plain sight and then took his own life. And you think to yourself, how many people that aren't famous, just regular people walking down the street, are suffering in silence? So if it can happen to one of the most famous people on the planet with the entire world watching, you just have to empathize and sympathize for these people that are walking around that don't have that support, that don't have anybody who's saying, hey, let's get you into Exodus Recovery Center. But also, we I think his story does teach us, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but a bit about bullying. And I'm not saying he was a bully. I'm saying I think the way the tabloids and the media really beat him up and demanded more of him than they were owed. And it's just a trope, and it's what they do. Sensationalism sells. But, you had this man who was suffering. And a lot of what the media was doing was making it worse. And it's just, I think, kind of an example for how you have people that have that's what they say, like, don't be mean to people because, like, or someone you don't know, don't treat them poorly because you never know what someone's got going on at home. And it just
Hmm.
happens every day. You don't know what people are battling, and I think we can learn from him. The world obviously needs more kindness, but with mental health is you don't know what people are going through. Sometimes you do know what people are going through, and it's taboo, there's a stigma, people don't want to speak about it. And you think you had this beautiful 27-year-old man that died and didn't have to. And I will tell you that a lot of the people I spoke with don't subscribe to that notion that, what do they say, he was destined to join, the 27 club, these people dying at 27. The people I spoke with in my book don't agree with that. One person said, yeah, that's a BS, attitude right there. I don't subscribe to it. I think more could have been done to help Kurt. What? I don't know. I wasn't part of that group, but I think, there's always hope. There's always something you can do to bring people back from that. A lot of people in the book said too, had he just held on a little longer, got over that hump of trying to kick heroin, you know what I mean? A lot of these things could have been the snowball effect for him getting better, that he would have, been here today. I think it's in the foreword of my book. So the foreword of my book was written by this incredible woman, Susan Collins. She's the former VP of A&R for Virgin Music America. So that was Nirvana's music publisher. And she really helped discover them like when they were at Sub Pop and get them to a major label. And her time with Kurt, she talks about it, in the foreword. And, she just kind of speaks about, would he still have been here today to see his daughter grow up had maybe he, things had been done differently, maybe with his music. So I think the takeaway from just examining Kurt Cobain's life is that you don't have to look at his life and his death and say, well, you knew that was going to happen because really, I love the people who say that. It's like, is your middle name Nostradamus? No, it did not have to happen. Nobody's fate is sealed, in that respect. And I think we can analyze his life and look for the markers and say, okay, how can we use these things to do better for other people who, Cobain experienced, homelessness. He was unhoused for a good portion of his, adolescent life. Um, he was forced to eat stolen food like so many people around the world. His struggles were universal. And I think we just dropped the ball in a sense where we forget that he wasn't the only person that went through these things. Other people do. So we need to really examine what we can do better as a society, even if it's just speaking openly about mental health. And that's why we have all these awesome resources now. You can call these numbers and warm lines, and you have people available 24/7 basically to talk to you if you're having a hard time. Because sometimes it just takes that. It just takes, what do they say? I think 8 minutes of somebody to just listen to you. So it's a shame that he didn't have the same access to that, almost 31 years ago now, since he passed, despite being on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. So,
Yeah, yeah, your struggles were universal, especially now with the rising rate of homelessness and
yeah,
addiction and things like that. Is that why you think his music is so enduring even to this day?
I think so. If you listen to, okay, so to me, this is what I thought was kind of wild. When you listen to some of the older songs, like he did, so he made something called a montage of Heck the Home Recordings, and it was I'm gonna flub here. I think it was 87 or 88. So he was maybe about 20, 21 when he did it. And it's him recording himself, a bunch of weird stuff on it. But I mean it's artistic and it's interesting. I think he's literally peeing on one of the tracks. I mean, it's like a bunch of, it's Kurt Cobain. Um, but it's where a lot of like, the original versions of Nirvana's songs came from, and one of them is Sappy. And when you listen to the lyrics for Sappy, it's just got so many meanings to it. Like if you listen to it, it sounds like, okay, maybe this is about domestic violence. Because it basically, as the song goes, it sounds like he's talking about somebody trapping a bug and keeping them in a jar in a laundry room. Because he says, conclusion came to you, you're in a laundry room. And I think when you look at that in modern times, it's like, well, that could have been about domestic violence, a partner feeling trapped in a relationship they can't get out of. We know he was a staunch supporter for gay rights. Maybe that might be people who don't feel comfortable being who they really are. You're kind of trapped in a jar in a laundry room. So even at, yeah, I mean, I can't even remember 20, and it was over 2 decades ago for me. And to think that a young man at 20 was so profound and thought on such a global level, it's just incredible. And the music resonates with a lot of people just because it's catchy. He had said he wanted to try to rip off the Pixies. It has that kind of Beatles-esque sound to some of it, But I think for people who are looking to really connect just with somebody, anybody. I think that's what his music does because you can take those lyrics and it's almost like a joke. Like, is he saying this? Is he saying that? Who cares? That's what the appeal was. He could have been saying anything. Um, it is what you make of it. Nirvana's music, Kurt's music, a lot of it, even if you don't know the lyrics, it's the guttural screams. It was that raw emotion. And it was not emotion designed to sell copies. It wasn't emotion designed to please, recording engineers or record label execs. It was because we know of how the violent end to his life. It was that raw emotion where he was just expressing himself. And I mean, how powerful are some of those screams where you can just hear him and listen, and it's like you can feel that coming through. And I think that just affects people to this day, especially that the song Something in the Way. And there's been a lot of speculation over that song over the years because Something in the Way is supposedly written about his time being unhoused and sleeping beneath the Young Street Bridge, aka Kurt's Bridge in Aberdeen, Washington. And you can go on Reddit and all these different, social media platforms, and you'll see people arguing about this. No, he didn't sleep beneath it. Yes, he slept beneath it. No, that's not what that song is about. Yes, that's what that song is about. And to me, when I was a special education teacher, I worked with a lot of disadvantaged children, and some of my students were unhoused. And that is often a confusing term for people. People assume unhoused and they picture somebody sitting on the side of the street somewhere. And I said, no, that's not what some of my students were experiencing. My students were couch surfing, essentially. And I have to explain to people unhoused is a lack of a permanent residence. And that is, I do speak about the Young Street Bridge and Kurt's, didn't he sleep beneath it a lot in the book, but I speak about it from a different angle. I say it's not whether he slept beneath that bridge or not, because people will split hairs all day about it. I said it's the fact that a child, a minor, did not have a permanent residence. That we know he was sleeping in the hospital waiting room of the hospital he was born in, because you can just stay in hospitals forever. Basically, nobody will kick you out of the waiting room. Um,
Hmm.
he was sleeping in cars and people's cars. He was sleeping in his car. I mean, to think of the level of determination and tenacity that he must have had to have been battling homelessness to get to international rock star. And it's not like, oh, he climbed the charts and he was international rock star in his 50s. No, like this happened in such a short amount of time. And it's not like one, yes, I do think, the stars, quote unquote, aligning helped, but you don't just get famous like that. He worked for that. He pushed for that. When Nirvana recorded the Bleach demo, I believe it was Chris Novoselic said that Kurt was cleaning toilets as a janitor to come up with the money for that. I mean, here was just this kid, for all intents and purposes, who didn't have a supportive home life, you know what I mean? And who was just putting their heart and their soul into doing the thing that they love more than anything, which was becoming a musician. I mean, just how inspiring is that? Um, and then you think when he got famous, right? He could have done anything with that fame. He could have been like, I had a, crap start to life. Screw it. I'm going to take any money I get. And it's another joke too, because musicians don't make as much money, I think, especially starting out as people think they did. Steve Albini, who recorded Nirvana's In Utero, has this incredible article that he wrote actually in 1993. And I believe it's called the either the problem with music or the trouble with music. I think it's the problem with music. And he does this whole breakdown about what musicians make on an album and what they actually take home versus what the record labels take home. And it's insane. It's not much. So
Yeah.
but you think he could have done anything because I mean, obviously there was money coming in, to Nirvana, and Cobain could have done anything, even outside of money. He could have been anybody. He could have done anything he wanted with that platform because it was almost kind of like, man, you deserve it, you earned it. The adults who were supposed to be adulting in your life didn't do what they needed to do to protect you, during a crucial time. You were scrounging for places to sleep. He could have gone up there and he could have been anybody, but he went up there and he used his platform for good. And he worked to shine a light on the social injustices of the world, despite having grown up in a situation where a lot of the social injustices were put on him. And he could have been, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying maybe he did have a chip on his shoulder about all these things. Maybe that's what pissed him off so much and he wanted to speak about these things candidly, but he didn't have to. And I just think that's incredible. Like what a human being at such a young age too. Can you imagine at 25 years old, you're this hyper, famous person now, and you're using your platform for good. I mean, just awesome, just incredible.
It is. So he was definitely a social justice advocate, and you mentioned that
Absolutely.
he was an advocate for gay rights.
I
What
did.
other causes were near and dear to his heart, and how did he use his platform to advocate for those causes?
Sure. So this one was Chris too, but so Chris had orchestrated the band to play at Cow Palace. And this particular concert was in support of Bosnian rape victims. Obviously, Kurt was there, happy to do it. And they played the show and they raised $50,000, which I mean, I think that's incredible. You know, it was the whole band had this social conscience. I can't even talk today. And there's the other concert, the No on Nine benefit concert that Kurt played. That was in solidarity of, or that Nirvana played. That was in solidarity of gay rights. Mia Zapata, the singer for the Gits. Um, After walking home from a gig one night, she was raped and murdered. And some people in the Seattle music community decided to put a benefit concert together to raise money to catch her killer. And obviously Nirvana was there. So there was zero, hesitation with helping out in the community. He even it was the liner notes for Incesticide, the Incesticide album. And Kurt said, I'm not going to say it verbatim, but basically it was like, if you're a racist, if you're a homophobe, if you in any way hate women, don't come to our shows, don't buy our albums, basically stay the F away. Who does that?
Mhm.
I mean, wow. This is you? This is the kind of person you are? Get out of here. My music isn't for you. Um, we know that he was frustrated because obviously you can't say who can and can't listen to your music. And there was obviously the frustration of a lot of the people he didn't write the music for being the ones to come to their shows. But I remember reading in an interview with him that he was saying, it used to really bother him that he knew those people were in the audience. But at the end of the day, he was the one on stage and he got the last word. So Oh,
That's
also,
awesome.
yeah, also fairness and accuracy in reporting, which is
Hmm.
kind of ironic. The Nirvana had played a benefit show for it's called Fair. It's I'm not sure if they're a nonprofit or not, but I know they probably are, but they're devoted to fairness and accuracy in reporting, and he had played a benefit show for them. And you think to yourself, he cared about that fairness and accuracy in reporting because you just saw the way his name got, you know what I mean, raked over the coals,
Hmm.
basically. So
Yeah.
he stood up for what he believed in, and he was vocal.
Yeah. And he was doing that back in the 90s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. When it's not
Yeah.
like today, it's not like today doing that. And it's like, well, you should be doing that. The
Hmm.
90s when it was much more, the pearl clutching.
Yeah.
And he didn't care. He did not care. And to me, it was, you think, was it the 1992 VMAs when the band wanted to play Rape Me on MTV and MTV was like, no, 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 you can't do that. You can't do that. And they came out and they started playing the beginning of Rape Me anyway, and then they stopped themselves and they played something else. I think it may have been Lithium. I don't remember. Um,
Hmm.
but you think because people just didn't understand what Rape Me was about. It wasn't a pro-rape song, which so many people thought it was. And Kurt does this interview where he says, I have to write songs as obvious as rape me, just to make people understand what I'm saying. I mean, look at Polly. People don't realize what Polly was about. Polly wants a cracker. People on the surface, oh, is it about a bird? No, he wrote a song about a man who had kidnapped, raped, and tortured this girl who was coming home from a concert. It's a true story. She managed to escape her captor. Obviously, the man was apprehended, but Cobain wrote Polly from the captor's point of view. Like who does it? Who even thinks to do that? And these songs were brilliant because they forced people to look at things that were uncomfortable.
Hmm.
It kind of not in my backyard. Yes, in your backyard. Here's what's going on in your backyard. Um, and he forced people to really think about these things. I mean, at that point when the band was not successful, he could have written anything and people would have bought, their music. And I think he had said his lyrics didn't really have any meaning, or he would write them on the way to a recording session. But that all came from somewhere. the words that he still chose to put down were still the words that he cared about and that mattered to him. And there was always some sort of, social conscience kind of like undertone to everything, just reminding people this was a person who really did care.
Yeah, I can definitely sense that listening to his music that he
Yeah,
had a conscience and he was somebody who really wanted to make the world a better place.
he did
Uh,
100%.
how do you think Cobain would have evolved as an artist and activist if he were alive today?
I think we would still see a very similar person. I don't think we'd see somebody flashy driving around and, you know what I mean, a Lamborghini or anything like that. I don't think we'd see him. I don't think he would have gone through like a skin tight leather pant trend or anything like that. Um, I do think he kind of would have just been like today, we would have been like, oh, what a leftover hippie. Like, I think that would have been him. I still think he would have been kind of this guy that liked to shop at thrift stores or maybe support local industry and stuff like that, local businesses. I think he still would have been very down to earth. I do think at a certain point he probably would have left the band, if not completely, maybe to just do his own thing. When you do listen to montage of Heck the Home recordings and it's just him and his guitar, um, there's something really stirring and beautiful and powerful and just him, the music, the vocals, not so much, no heavy bass, no drums or anything. And I'm not saying that Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl weren't phenomenal in Nirvana, but I do think that Cobain would have maybe gone off to kind of do his own thing, maybe experimented, um, with maybe he would have connected with some indie musicians. I do think we would have seen him do more benefit shows, even if not as a musician, as someone endorsing it. I think I don't think he would have become radicalized along the way. I think if he had seen the value in his life that everybody else saw, and we still had him here today, I really do think we would see somebody who's just still a social justice warrior, kind of doing his own thing. I don't know that I could see him wanting to still be in the limelight so much. Like, you have Dave Grohl who fronts the Foo Fighters, and I don't know if that would have been Kurt because it feels like fame just really affected him. And I think had he seen, hey, you've got this little girl, this daughter that really needs you. And if fame is kind of one of the catalysts for you going on this downward spiral, I like to think maybe he would have stepped away, done music in a sense that he still loved, but really would have only done it in a way that allowed him to still be, the father that she needed. Because you see the pictures of him with her, and it's like just so much love and adoration, and how sad that he isn't here to watch her grow up. She just became a mother. How sad that he
Mm.
that his depression was more overpowering that in that moment anyway than what he had with his daughter. And again, like I said, you know um we know that he did take was on drugs right before he died, and you think to yourself, because we know he wasn't in a clear state of mind when he died. But you think to yourself, had he just realized more about what he was doing for people around him and that his daughter needed him, you hope that he would have still been here today to have seen the lovely human being that she grew up to be. She actually has a website and she sells his merchandise, I think, with his signature on it. And they do give 10% to the Jed Foundation because obviously for suicide awareness. So how sad though that's how she lost her father.
Yeah. Is this the first book you've written? And have you
Yeah.
written anything else?
No, I mean I write for online publications. I kind of been messing around with another book. It was kind of like Nirvana fan fiction, but no, this is it. I never I never wanted to be an author. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't know if I'll write another book or not. This took a tremendous amount of time and energy. Like I said, being a full-time parent, being a full-time homeschooling parent, you know, just being a wife, a mom, also working. I am a writer. I mean, I work from home, but I do write for I think like seven different places at this point. So I'm busy, and writing this book was a huge undertaking, and I support the reason that I did it, but I don't know if I'd do it again. Obviously, if somebody came to me and was like, "Hey, I want you to write this story, and we're going to give 50% of the profits to another awesome organization," like that's one thing I would do it. But this was really my first go at this. I got bit by some bug and I felt like I had to write this. It was really strange. It was really strange. This was not like I spent years planning this. I literally got up one day and was like, I'm going to write a book about Kurt Cobain. And my husband was like, wait, what? Like, don't get me wrong, totally supportive from day one, but he was like, you don't even like Nirvana. And I was like, good. He's like, but can you like name one song outside of Smells Like Teen Spirit? I was like, come as you are. I went into this. I didn't know my ass from my elbow about the band. Um, Now I love them. I think the music is phenomenal. And I gotta tell you what was really cool writing this book was one, not planning it. Like literally got up and was like, I'm gonna write this book and just started emailing people. Um, Not having planned it and not having ever read anything, any literature about Cobain beforehand. Like there's Michael Azerrad's Come As You Are, and now he's got the amplified Come As You Are, which was released. I'm not sure when. And then you had Charles Cross's Heavier Than Heaven, which was the biography. And you've got these books, but I didn't read them because I was so worried about having my version of Kurt Cobain's life tainted by somebody else's words. And you've got, Michael Azerrad who knew Kurt. You've got Charles Cross who um I don't I mean, I don't know if I don't think he knew him like intimately. I think it was more I'm not really sure about that relationship, but I know he had access to Kurt Cobain's private journals. So you had these two people who had this information, Azrad, who had Cobain's blessing to write the book and wrote it when Cobain was alive. Um, and that will obviously affect how a book sounds when it's about somebody
Mm.
you know versus somebody you're writing about. So I didn't read anything when I came into this. I actually still haven't read anything. I just wanted to, and I plan on it, but I have my version of what I think about Kurt Cobain, and I don't know if I want to read anything else because I'm afraid it might change that. A couple of people had told me, one person didn't want to do the interview with me. They're in my book, but was hesitant at first because he was like, I've spoken to a bunch of other people, and my words have gotten twisted over the years. And that was actually a common theme I heard from people. They're like, we're nervous to do interviews because our words have gotten twisted over the years. We say stuff, we see stuff come out. It's not what we said. It's in multiple publications, books, blah, 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 blah. So what I did was after I wrote everything, I sent everybody in the book their chapters. And I said, prove it. Make sure you're happy with it. Um, so I everything is as it, was told to me. And again, I can't, validate anything. I'm as good as the information people gave me, and that's just what was told. More than one person was hesitant to do an interview because they did say their words were twisted over the years in print. So my book might read differently than different information on the internet about Kurt, whatever, and I'm only as good as the information that people gave me. But so yeah, so I never planned on doing this. Did it without any working information about Kurt. Didn't want to read anything about him, and really got to experience, I think, a different side of him. I think it's in my foreword too. I believe it was Susan who says that she hasn't read any books about Kurt, or she doesn't like to read books about him because she doesn't feel that they portray the Kurt that she remembers. So again, went into this totally not knowing anything. First book, first attempt. Hope people like it.
Awesome. It sounds like you definitely wanted to portray the human,
Yep.
and not the tragic story or the
Mm-mm.
tabloid story that so much of
Mm-mm.
the mainstream media portrays. So you said that a portion of the proceeds of this book is going to charity.
Yep.
I was going to say what inspired you to do that, but I think you've pretty much explained throughout the interview. But I want to know, what charities are you donating to?
Sure, sure. So I've already hosted, and this was me not wanting to make good to show people, but because I was just so excited to hit the ground running with this book and the donations. I did the writing workshop last summer, gave 100% of the profits to Camp Victory in Cobain's hometown. Um, They'll also get money from the royalties of the book. Some of the other money, I do want to support Cobain's hometown of Aberdeen. Some of the money will go to the Grays Harbor Conservation District. They're phenomenal. And their volunteers come out and preserve and maintain the Kurt Cobain Memorial Park, which, I mean, gets a lot of foot traffic, and gets to be, well, it looks like it gets a lot of foot traffic. So I'll give them some money to continue to preserve and maintain the park and keep doing the incredible work they do. Some other money is going to the Aberdeen Food Bank just to kind of help out some people in town. On February 20th, Kurt's birthday, that's when the book officially launches. It's just available for pre-sale right now. But when the book officially launches, I'm having a party at a large record store. We're actually putting the tickets on sale next week. I've got some cover bands coming. We are giving 100% of the profits to Ginny's House. They are a children's advocacy center. They are phenomenal with the work that they do. This is super exciting. We just got licensing to turn the book has two covers because there's a hardcover and a paperback. We just got licensing permission to turn the paperback into a poster. It's just Kurt's face. And at the concert, we're going to be selling those posters 100% going right back to Ginny's house. Um, some other charities, obviously something for suicide awareness and prevention. I was going to send some money to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, but I'm thinking of maybe looking for a smaller organization that maybe we can help out. When I was writing the book, I did attend a suicide survivors support group because I mean it was 2 years of suicide ideology that you're just speaking of. It's hard. And it just made me think a lot about Walter and losing him. So I did attend, a meeting, and the woman who ran the meeting lost her son to suicide. And obviously, as a mom, that is just I couldn't go to another meeting. I thought the meetings were just very upsetting. And your heart breaks for these people. But I wanted to do something for her. And because she's just lovely, and how terrible that she lost her child. She started a scholarship in her son's name. So I'll be giving them some of the money from the book. And then another one of the organizations is Letters to Santa. So in my book is a chapter with and devoted to the late Steve Albini, who produced In Utero. Um, he was lovely. And we last spoke on the 30th anniversary of Kurt's passing. So that would have been April 5th of 2024. And just about a month later, Steve died suddenly. Awful.
Mm.
And like I said, he was a lovely human being who didn't hesitate to be part of this book. So his wife, Heather Winna, founded and runs charity, Letters to Santa. And basically what they do is they get these letters from people. And I wish I could be able to ensure all my children have shoes. Or please don't make me, I don't want to choose between which one of my kids gets coats. Just awful what people go through. And this organization ensures that these families all receive a wonderful Christmas. I forget what the age is, but the older kids all get maybe like Chromebooks or something, and the younger kids all get, tablets. And then I think every family just gets $10,000, no strings attached, for you to pay bills. So this charity was started by Steve's wife, and Steve championed it. So to thank Steve for being part of my book, and I hate that it's one of his final interviews. It just, that he was really lovely. It really bothers me. But to thank Steve, my book also supports Letters to Santa charity. So
Awesome. Sounds great. Those are
thank
some
you.
great charities, and I'm
Thank
glad you're
you.
helping them out. Where can people go to buy the book when it's released? And you said it's coming out on his birthday, which I
Yep.
believe is February 20th.
Yep. It'll be on, I mean, you can just go right on Amazon right now if people want to buy an advance copy. If you type in Kelly Catlin, Kurt Cobain, it comes up. If you type in, Kurt Cobain, Genius Book Publishing, it comes up because my publisher is Genius Book Publishing, and it's on their music book site right now, so it's available there. There's a couple different versions of it. Just some people have a certain look of a book that they like. There's the paperback, which has the photo from Gilbert Blecken when it was taken in Berlin in 1991. And then there is the hardcover edition, which is bigger. I believe it's 8.5 by 11 versus the paperback, which is 6 by 9. But the neat thing about the hardcover, so the legendary photographer Henry Diltz, he was the official Woodstock photographer in 1969. Henry was at Nirvana's last, and nobody could have known at this time, but what would be Nirvana's last LA show on December 30th, 1993, at the Forum in California. And Henry was not there as a photographer. He was there taking his daughter to see the show. But obviously, he had his camera with him. And he sees, this kind of commotion and everybody's taking pictures of the band. So he promised his wife he wouldn't leave his daughter alone, but he's like, just stay here 1 minute, just 1 minute. So he goes and he takes all these pictures of Nirvana. And a couple months later, Kurt Cobain winds up, he's died by his own hand. And Henry Diltz looks at the pictures and they're all, he's kind of blurry, but the last picture on the roll, he releases to the world. And this is the only picture that Henry has of that night, and it's at the Morrison Hotel Gallery. Henry's awesome. He showed us the roll. We saw all the pictures from that night. It was really cool. And he let us choose one. So we chose one, and that is the photo that is on the black hardcover version of the book. It's a never before released photo of Kurt Cobain. I mean, is it him, trading state secrets behind? No, it's just him on stage. But it's cool because it's a new photo and you don't get to say that much. 30 years, later, I have a new photo of Kurt Cobain and it's taken by Henry Diltz. So that book is kind of, I think, a little bit of a keepsake in that sense. And then there's the ebook. So, but it doesn't matter what version of a book somebody buys. The posters will be available for sale too. At least 50% of my profits are going to charity. So
Last two questions.
sure.
What's your favorite Nirvana song? And what is it that you want people to take away from this book?
Sure, absolutely. I know I talked about it earlier, but Sappy. Sappy is my favorite. And it's not Nirvana's kind of heavy recorded version of it. It's Kurt Cobain's version from Montage of Heck, the home recordings. And it's because of the duality of it, that it could be about, somebody who's in a domestic abuse relationship. It could be about somebody who's maybe, battling with something and feels stifled, or somehow they have to lock their feelings away from the world. There's a rawness to it. And again, having somebody who was so young, write this song, I believe he was 20 or 21. It's just, to me, it's moving. The fact that it was recorded before, the band was this legendary, the status that we see today. It was just, I hope you listen to that version if you haven't. It's just so, I don't know, something about it just gets me every single time I hear it, and I could listen to it on repeat. It's dark, it's brooding, it's emotive. It gets me every time. Um, and then what do I hope people take away from the book? Two things. I I hope, and look, it's been 30 years since he passed away, and I am one person who's not part of the Seattle music scene. I don't write for any kind of, you know, big newspapers. I don't have a background in journalism. I didn't know Kurt. I'm coming out of left field with this, but I hope it can change the narrative around him a little bit, because I think it's socially irresponsible to keep pushing the tortured artist. We have, first off, that wasn't all he was. He was not defined by his depression. And we have a lot of young people who look up to him, and we owe it to young people to not just push the version of him that gets clicks, gets sales, but the version of him that reminds people, hey, he battled like other people do. He battled with this, that, and the third, but we could have changed that narrative. We could have helped him. So one, I really, really, really hope that the book changes the narrative around who he was to one that I think is more honest and less misleading because he really wasn't defined by his depression. Not according to the people in my book, anyway. The people in my book all feel that a lot of the narrative surrounding him is just sensationalized and enough already. It's been done to death. Move on. Especially when you think of how possibly the media maybe played a role in that depression. It's like, then why do you want to continue to perpetuate that? Like enough, give this man a break. But also, if nothing else, the book can't bring Kurt back. It can't bring, my loved one, Walter, back. But maybe the very, very end of it has a huge list of mental health resources. Maybe one person can benefit from that. Maybe one person will, call one of these warm lines or reach out, or maybe something in the book will resonate with them and they'll realize they're not alone and it'll save a life. Um, if I can do that with the book, I succeeded. That's it. That's it. I don't care if I make any money on this book. I'm not looking to become a New York Times bestselling anything. The only appeal about being, a bestselling author means I've sold a lot of copies and a lot of people have been affected by the book. And I've got, more money than selling 10 copies to send to charity. That's literally my only driving force behind this book. I'm happy with my life. I have a lovely family. I'm not looking to bolster a career with this book. I'm looking to remind people that don't believe everything you read, especially on the internet. Um,
Yeah,
and that Kurt Cobain's life deserves a second look because he's you, he's me, he's everybody. Um, and we can just do better as a society. That man stood for equality and he wanted to see widespread change. Um, Anybody who continues to remember him for just the depressed completely missed the memo on who he was and isn't honoring him, in my opinion. So I think we need to get out there and really start pushing the correct narrative. This guy, sure, he had depression. Yes, no, nobody's negating that, but he also really cared about people. So let's start to do some good. That's the best way to honor somebody. Let's do some good in his name. Hey, let's go out. Let's scream from the rooftops if we believe in a charity and organization. Let's do something. Hey, this man battled, homelessness. Hey, is there somebody who's unhoused in your town? Bring him a blanket, bring him some food, do something. Volunteer at the food pantry, do something. Everybody did a little bit. We got a lot more done in this world. Anytime I do book signings, they're also going to be food drives too. So, I mean, look, am I going to be able to save the world? No, but maybe I can help one family in my community. And I think if everybody can just especially the people that, oh, Kurt Cobain meant so much to me. Kurt Cobain affected my life. Okay, what are you going to do then to affect somebody else's? So that's what I hope people take away from it. Just we have to stop trying to push narratives that aren't. I'm not saying that he wasn't depressed again, but there was a whole human there
yeah,
who helped a lot of people. Let's remember the good he
exactly.
did. That's how we celebrate people. It's a celebration of life, this book. It's not a biography. It's definitely a celebration of life. So that's
I
my
love that.
long-winded
So,
answer.
hey, no problem. I appreciate it. It's a celebration of life, and I
Yeah,
can't wait to check out the book. And I
me too.
hope my audience does too.
I
Thank you
hope
for
so
coming
too.
on today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. I originally interviewed Kelly back in January, just ahead of the release of her book in February. At the time, she asked me to hold off on publishing the episode due to a wave of online backlash she was receiving. I followed up with her in June, and she gave me the green light to release it. We also decided to record a follow up conversation to address the online hate she faced and how she's navigating through it. This is that interview. All right, welcome back, Kelly. So, yeah, I just wanted to do a follow up with you now that your book has come out. It seems like you had dealt with a lot of internet backlash, and I just want to talk about that and see what all you went through. So, tell me what happened when the book came out.
Sure. I mean, look, it's a book and it's the internet.
Hmm.
And anytime you put yourself out there, it doesn't matter what you do, you're kicking a hornet's nest. And I was warned. I mean, I'm not gonna deny that. A lot of people had said to me, like, you're putting a book out about Kurt Cobain. Like this is like holy ground here, you know what I mean? And people are going to react and people are going to have opinions. But I think unless you actually go through it, you can't like prepare yourself for the opinions, because opinion is an understatement. It's more like abuse. And the things that came out of people's mouths, it was almost kind of like, oh, you're just saying that because you can, because you're, because you're on the internet, and why not? You know what I mean? And look, like we're all guilty of it. Like, you go to YouTube and you watch a video and everybody scrolls down to the comment section. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're on the receiving end of that and you're just, really getting like kicked in the teeth on the internet, it sucks. And that's an understatement. And for me, my knee-jerk reaction was, I've got family that watches these podcasts or listens to these podcasts or watches these interviews with me. And like don't want people seeing some of these like disgusting, and they were pretty disgusting, some of the comments, like people just calling me like, filthy parts of the human anatomy and stuff like that. And for me, I mean, I started reaching out, and I don't care, I'll be honest about this, but I did reach out to a lot of people that I did interviews with, and I asked for the interviews to be pulled because I just I didn't want to keep reading the comments. And finally, my publicist was like, it takes getting used to. He was like, it happens to all of us. He was like, just stop reading the comments. And you actually stuck in my head. You did, because you said some things to me that mattered. And I wanted to thank you for that. And I thought to myself, I didn't write this book for it to collect dust on my computer. I wrote this to maybe, do some good in the world. And I think what also made me kind of like, okay, I can do these interviews and step back and do things a little different, was that I thought about the charities that the book supports. And you think to yourself, the people that are some people in these dire situations, they can't just, turn off YouTube and escape their problems like I can with the stupid comments from this book. So that kind of, I think, pulled like me out of my not wanting to do any kind of media rut. So yeah, so it's an experience. It definitely takes getting used to, that's for sure.
Yeah, the internet, it's the thing about the internet is that it gives everybody a voice. The bad thing is that some people don't need to be heard, and then when you add in the fact that a lot of the comments are anonymous, people can say things that they would never say in real life.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That was my thing, was like, I have a pretty visible website and people email me and ask me questions all the time. And I'm like, look, if you have a problem with my book, like, why don't you go ahead and send me an email? Because I started disabling comments because I like just didn't want to hear people anymore. And then people would kind of spout off elsewhere, where they could still comment like, oh, what's the matter? Can't handle a differing opinion? I can handle a differing opinion. I'm not going to sit here and be like cannon fodder, like for your online abuse. Like that's one thing is a differing opinion. Another thing is just gross and people just trying to get attention. So yeah, no, I'm not going to entertain all of it,
Mm-hmm. At
Yeah.
what point did you realize like the backlash was starting to grow louder and become more of a problem?
It was right away. It was right away. There was a Reddit post that it's like funny, not funny, but people will actually reach out to me still like, oh, I saw your Reddit post. And I'm like, it wasn't my post, but what's what sucked about that is you have to have karma to post in certain groups. So I'm just like getting chewed out on Reddit. And I don't want to say that because I want to say like 99% of the comments were really positive. But some of the things that people were saying, it's like, I can't even comment because I didn't have the karma, So I'm like on these like cat groups on Reddit, just like upvoting things to get myself the Reddit karma to be able to clap back. And people were DMing me, apologizing and things like that. It was right off the bat because I think the Reddit post was the first thing. And a lot of the comments just come from people being misinformed and not understanding how the publishing industry works. And that's not their fault. But like some of the first comments right off the bat weren't even like internet backlash or anything. It was just, oh, I hope she cleared, using Kurt's photo with the family. And I didn't comment. Somebody else commented on that. And they were like, that's not how intellectual property works. Because it's not. The Cobain estate does know about this book, but I the only person's permission I needed to use his photo was the photographer's photo, because that's his intellectual property. So, just like big silly things like that. I'm like, you're not even accurate with what you're saying, things like that. And then people started pushing back like, oh, there's no way this is for charity. And I had originally said that I was going to donate 50%. And the reason I said that, again, these are things that people don't understand, was I want to say this book cost me, not my publisher. There's this big misconception that publishers pay for everything. That's not the way it works. It cost me about $4,000 to write this book, because it's not easy to do something like this. You have to, it's not just writing it. First off, you have to license photos. So the cover art was extremely expensive. Not the paperback that was donated, but the other limited edition hardcover, that was very expensive. Next off, I have lyrics in my book, and I didn't want to risk any kind of issues. I know a lot of authors don't really care. They use lyrics. They argue fair use. Fair use is just that. It's an argument. It's not a right. It's not a go ahead. It's not a yes, you can 100% use this. I had spoken to, I think, like 3 attorneys about it beforehand, and they all explained the same thing. They're like, fair use is an argument. If you want to roll the dice, be my guest. You'll probably win, but what's that going to cost you in legal fees? And for me, it's not something I'm going to risk. So I went and I did everything above board, and I licensed all the lyrics, and not for nothing. It's the right thing to do. I'm using somebody else's lyrics in my book. I should be going about it through the appropriate channels. That's just me. So, I had to license all the lyrics. And then there's just a ton of other stuff that you have to do. There's, transcribing things. And I was under a tight deadline because this was a traditionally published book. So I couldn't get 146,000 words worth of, transcription done. So on my own, I had to go and, use a service. So anyhow, by the end of the day, you've put out like a ton of money on this thing, right? So I had originally said 50% because my hope was maybe to be able to pay myself back a little bit, right? For some of what this book cost. Making money? Absolutely not. Maybe paying myself back for at least the licensing fees for the lyrics. Okay. I didn't do that. I wound up just giving 100% of my royalties to charity. That's not my publisher's royalties, just me, what I make. So when people go and say stuff like that, it's definitely them just trying to get attention on the internet. Because it's like, I don't know you, you don't know me. Who are you to tell me what I am or am not doing with my money? Like, did you go spend 2.5 years writing a book? Like, did you go become friends with Kurt Cobain's friends, do all this, put $4,000 into this thing? Are you now donating all of your money? So it was just like a lot of like ridiculousness. Yeah. It's like, right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing too. Like a lot of the people who are hating online, they haven't really accomplished anything with their life, and that's why they do it. Let me ask you this. Did you receive any support that helped you through it? Like friends or other authors or people within the music industry? Did any of them come to your defense?
It's funny because some of the first people to throw like shade at me were other authors, and you'd think that they would know better because they're authors. They know what this is like. And like one of the first comments that I got on Facebook was another author, and the comment was something like, I think the book had just come out, right? It was out for like, I don't know, like 6 hours or something. And he was like, oh, that's awesome that the book's been out for, 3 hours and you already have 2 5-star reviews on Amazon, like insinuating that they were fake reviews. And I wrote back and I said, yeah, I said, the book just came out on Amazon like today. I said, it's been available for pre-sale through my publisher for a month. I said, people have had advanced copies of this book. So a lot of people had already read the book. It wasn't, you know what I mean? A lot of people had already, and it's so ridiculous when authors say this because I'm like, you know how the industry works. You know what an ARC is, advanced reading copy. We give it to people specifically. So when the book comes out, they can leave honest reviews. And it's almost like a joke because so many authors go and get these paid reviews of their books too. So it's like, I didn't pay a dime for reviews. I gave it to people. And I was like, please. Also, yeah.
Also, he was saying that you had 2 5-star reviews in 5 hours. That's not unreasonable, is it? Even if it didn't come out early, That's not unreasonable to have 2 5-star reviews.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I could
Thank you.
see if you had. I could see if you had like 100 of them or
Mhm.
something. But yeah, just two. Yeah,
Two
that's not
for you.
unreasonable.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, why would you even go and say that on social media? And like I said, I wrote back and I was like, well, as you know, the industry works. I was like, people get advanced reading copies, and if they're, emphatic about wanting to review my book, like I appreciate that. So the people, but here's the thing though, and I've learned this, a lot of authors do kind of treat the industry like a zero-sum game. So I wasn't terribly surprised that I didn't, you know what I mean? I did get, like, don't get me wrong, there are some authors that I know that were very supportive, but I did kind of find that other authors, when I was writing this book, were like the most prickly. It's like you're stepping on their toes somehow because you're putting a book into the world. And it's like, there's like a gazillion books that come out every single year. Like, trust me, it's
Hmm.
not like I'm inventing like a new car or something where people can only pick one, yours or mine. It's like a $10 ebook. They can get both. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just kind of strange. Support came from friends and family and a lot of Kurt's friends. Um, obviously my friends and family are there for me, but it's not an experience that they can understand. As far as listening to me, yeah, absolutely. They would, sit there and listen to me and were totally there and had my back. But it was a lot of times that I would, talk to some of Kurt's friends and they'd be like, yeah, no, we know exactly what you're going through. Why do you think we don't do interviews anymore? Or, like, not everybody who was quote unquote a part of this book is mentioned in the book. So there were other friends of Kurt's who did help me. Maybe it was like fact checking the book or, just kind of being like a viable resource that aren't in it. And the reason for that is they tell me every time we do a book, a movie, a whatever, it's just some sort of backlash they get, or creepier yet, people just show up at their doorstep. And
Oh wow.
yeah, like people just really crossing lines. And they just didn't want to have their names on this, which I respected. They're like, we just need a break. Like, you know what I mean? So, but they were definitely there for me. And they were like, look, you have to learn to tune the static out. Like, I can't think of the exact quote, but one of his friends was so funny. He was like, yeah, has anybody told you that you've spelled your name wrong yet? He's like, because everybody online knows better than you. So, but no, they were, along with my family, it was really nice to have his friends to be able to, I think, soundboard off of, because this is something they've been going through, for like 30 plus years now.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So has this changed how you plan to write or publish in the future?
Yeah, it has. I'm in the process of editing book number 2, and I think I'm going to put it out under a pen name because I just don't want to deal with it. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, and it's funny because I was kind of warned about this by a couple people coming into it, but I don't know if I want to use the word like typecast or got pigeonholed, but now I'm, that person that wrote about Kurt Cobain. And that seems to be like my professional identifier, and not even professional, personal. You wouldn't be surprised by like how many I'll just get text messages from people. Oh, I saw this about, Kurt Cobain on Google, or look, I saw this magazine and Nirvana was on it. And it's just what people associate me with. And I was kind of given a heads up about that. And another author friend of mine, one of the supportive authors, he was like, do yourself a favor, put another book out immediately. He's like, otherwise, that's what you're going to get associated with. But it's not that easy to just shoot another book off, And
Hmm.
I do kind of lean towards a certain kind of writing. It is my art, and I do write things that are a little bit more, brooding, I guess you'd say. And I'm just afraid that if I put my second book out as me, it's fiction, but I'm afraid that the storyline, people are just gonna immediately, oh, Kurt Cobain, Nirvana, because it's a music book, but it's not. It's just stories that I've heard, while I was writing this, and it just kind of turned into this, fictional book that I put together. But I want it to be judged on its own merit, not on me, the Cobain, because I'm not the only one, but a Cobain biographer having written it. So.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to be typecast. I get it. So your next book, do you want to talk about that? I'm curious what it's going to be about. If you don't have to, if you don't want to, but
Oh, it's kind of I keep calling it a cross between Burroughs's Junkie and Train Spotting, in that it's got a lot of that prose, but it's not, and I love Burroughs, but it's not, kind of as dry as that. And it's just when I wrote Forever in Bloom, a lot of this stuff, the stories you hear, they're tough, because you're not getting the secondhand information. You're getting a lot of stuff right from the source, from people who are there and people who lived it. And, I'm a musician and I used to play in bands. And I think about, and this is just such a microscopic kind of online, nonsense that I had to deal with. But I took a lot of these stories and I thought to myself, I think I'm going to turn that into its own book. Totally separate, nothing to do with the band or anything like that. But I do think there's this insidious side of the music industry, and not even just the music industry, but the entertainment industry, and what happens to these performing artists when they're really put on this platform in front of the entire world, and how, mental health kind of goes out the window, and addiction tends to be, if you come into the industry maybe already with addiction, it might be amplified or heightened by the stress and the demands of a certain lifestyle. And I just basically took those stories and put them into something fictional where we could kind of watch a character, battle addiction and go through these different kind of arcs about redemption and learning to love yourself despite, maybe an abusive childhood and things like that. So I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know what to do with this book.
Hey, it sounds interesting. Sounds
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. I don't know. I don't know if I want to like traditionally publish it. I'm like leaning more towards self-publishing a lot lately. I don't know if this is something you want to, discuss or not on here, but my book is no longer available for sale. It was only out for 3 months, and I look, I don't have numbers to compare this stuff to, you know what I mean? I thought it did really well. I talked to a friend of mine who's an indie publisher, and she had said to me, she said in 3 months, actually, I think it was 2.5, she was like, your book sold more copies than the average independently published nonfiction book sells in a lifetime.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I felt really good about that. I said, really? And she was like, yeah. She's like, whatever number, like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that people don't sell more. They do. But she kind of gave me some numbers and she was like, you hit the sweet spot, if you kind of wanna call it quits. And like I said, there's always some like back and forth this. It was traditionally published through an indie publisher, which some people call not traditional publishing, but by the definition it is. So I don't know. It just wasn't for me. And I did something called a rights reversal, where I asked for the rights to my book back. And that was it. I got the rights to my book back. I had to fight Amazon to get the book pulled. But yeah, that was it. So I don't know. I'm kind of fickle with my art. I like being in complete control of it. So that's just it. I wanted my book presented a certain way. So I pulled my contract. Now, I've spoken to my publicist about this because I've been speaking to a couple other publishers about them taking over the rights to the book. And I said, be honest with me. Okay, so let me ask you something, right? What's a book that you really like? Just any book that you like.
I would say The Alchemist by Paul, I think it's Coelho.
Okay, let me ask you something. Do you know who published it?
I don't.
Okay, that's my point. And that was my publicist's point too. He was like, the media, he's like, and readers don't care who a publisher, is. And I was looking at this is the other thing too. Like I love when people make comments. So I was looking at the royalties to one of the publishers that has the book right now and is considering it. It's 10% royalties. Why would I even want to do that? Like if I go and stick it on Amazon, I get between 60 and 70% royalties. And that means the charities, there's 11 of them now that the book supports, gets a significant, amount of money. I think people assume too that just because a book is like traditionally published that you have this huge like team behind you pushing it. It's not the case. It's on the author to promote their own book, which is why I have a fantastic publicist. And I don't know, to me, like if I'm going to put all this time, energy, effort, and money into this, why go and get it traditionally published? I'll just do it myself. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm leaning right now. Yeah, I don't know. I think it did a lot of good. I don't know. I like to think it did a lot of good. We Ginny's not Ginny's house, I'm sorry. Camp Victory. They're in Aberdeen. So they offer free summer camp for children who are sexual abuse survivors. And them alone, we were able to get $1,200 too. So, which doesn't go as far as you hope it would. It costs about $600 a child. So, but I mean, we did get them, pretty tidy sum of money, which was
Yeah.
great. The royalty checks are still coming in, so I'm not done yet with sending it out places. But yeah, no, I didn't keep any of it. I felt like weird. Not that I would have kept any of it anyway. Like I was just going to pay myself back, like I said, for lyrics and whatnot. I don't know. I just didn't want to. It's not like I made $1 million on it, I don't know. I wanted to use it to do some good. So
That's cool. And I'm glad you did. I know during the previous interview we talked about the charities that you supported, but real quick, can we just go through? So you said Camp Victory, and what are some other
yeah.
charities that you supported?
Oh, this was pretty cool. So the first royalty check I got was I put in an order with Safeway in Aberdeen and like a big food order. And the owner of the Tangerine Tree went and picked it up with Aaron Burkhart, who's Nirvana's first drummer. And they brought all the food over to the Aberdeen Food Bank. So that was really cool. So that was the first one. Some of the other charities are Ginny's House, and they are a children's advocacy center. So they help kids who are in abusive situations. There's another, so this was depressing. When I was writing the book, obviously, look, it's about celebrating Kurt Cobain, but I talked to a ton of people, and every story ends the same, right? He dies. And I wrote the book because I lost a loved one, Walter, to suicide. So when you're talking about this stuff, I say heavy, but that's really an understatement. So at one point, I was talking to some suicide survivors, and it's depressing and it's grueling listening to stories. And I wanted to try to help out, one of these women that I was speaking to, and her son had died by suicide. And she started a scholarship for him at a community college. So I'm going to be, like I said, I'm still waiting for the royalty checks to finish coming in, but I'm going to send some money there. Some of the other organizations. So this one, although I don't, I'm not in the Chicago area or anything, but it matters a lot to me because it mattered a lot to Steve Albini. And Steve Albini produced Nirvana's third album, In Utero, and he passed away about a month after we last spoke. And he was part of this book. And I have so much respect for Steve because I can't even tell, like, don't get me wrong. This book is 146,000 words. It's 500 pages. I have a ton of people in it, but a lot of people kind of like blew me off or I'm too busy and stuff like that. And Steve Albini was ridiculously busy and he made time for it. And I didn't know this at the time. I spoke to his bandmate, Todd Trainer, afterwards. And I said, Todd, I said, was there like a charity that Steve would have really appreciated or anything I can do to say thank you? And he said, Letters Charity. He said it's actually founded and run by his wife, Heather. And what they do is they get these letters to Santa, and it's these families basically giving wish lists for what they need. And they go and they make these holidays happen. And then every family that they sponsor for Christmas gets $10,000. No questions asked, no strings attached. This is for you. So that's one of the charities the book supports. And that's my way of thanking Steve for his contribution to this. So I think everything in it is really incredible. There's another charity, it's called TAPS, and they help family members of service members who've died by suicide. And they helped my family after Walter died because Walter was a veteran Marine. So, and then I'm doing some things for, like, there's one Twin Harbors Wildlife Center out by Aberdeen, and they do things to help, rehab some wildlife that's been injured. So I'm just trying to spread it. I was going to do something with the Grays Harbor Conservation District to kind of give Kurt's Memorial Park in Aberdeen a bit of a facelift, but they've got some major construction going on now or soon. I don't know. I don't live out there. They're taking that bridge down. They're taking his iconic bridge down.
Oh, wow.
Which sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I have so many thoughts.
Yeah. That's crazy.
I have so many thoughts on that. But I have been in touch with the Seattle Parks Department about maybe, planting a tree or something in his honor or putting another bench out somewhere. So just different things in the works.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, hey, it sounds great. It sounds like you're doing a lot of good with this book. And
Thank
I think Kurt Cobain would be proud that you're using his memory to, do such good things.
Can
So,
I comment on that real quick? Thank you, because I agree.
yeah.
One of my favorite comments that I got, and this to me always cracks me up. Somebody tagged me on Facebook just to get shitty with me, and I'm like, do you really think I'm gonna respond? You know what I mean? And it started out like real kind of like muted the comment, and it was like, look, this book, it doesn't matter if you're donating the money or not. I need you to stop. Make yourself a cup of tea, sit in a chair, and ask yourself, is this really what Kurt would want? Because he would have hated this. Shame. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, hold on. Let's just unpack this real quick. Like, out of the two of us, like this random internet person and me, who do you think might know a little bit more about what he would have wanted? Like the person that just spent, 2.5 years with his friends, former bandmates, management, or the random internet person, right? So there are so many things about that drove me crazy, that comment. Like, first off, why wouldn't Kurt Cobain have wanted a book written about him? He sat with Michael Azerrad for Nirvana's official biography. So clearly he didn't have a problem with a book being written about him. Okay. Two, the man was a vocal feminist. I highly doubt he would have a problem with a woman writing a biography about him. Three, people don't realize how many benefit shows Nirvana played. They were in Edinburgh at one point, and they played something for a children's hospital. They played No on Nine in solidarity of gay rights. I mean, this was an altruistic human being, but unfortunately, the media likes to remember him and portray him as, one of his friends, said, just another quote unquote crass drug addict. So to me, sitting here, like, why wouldn't he like a book about him with all the money being donated? So again, it's just people spouting off silliness just for, the sake of it. And I even said to some of his friends, like, I was like, he would have liked this, right? And they were like, we wouldn't have helped you with the book if he wouldn't have. So, I mean, it's just, I had a lot of people telling me what Kurt would have wanted. And I'm like, I share friends with this man. I think if one of us knows better what he would have wanted, it's probably me. So, yeah.
Exactly.
I do think he would have liked this, though. I think the one comment, this wasn't from someone online, this was from one of his friends, that hit the hardest was a friend of his said, because we were going over everything and making sure the book was polished and whatnot. And he just said to me, Kurt would have really liked you. And I loved that comment, but it also sucked because I thought to myself, had he not died, I would not have needed to have written this book. So I have such a profound respect for this man. And I think some people were put off that it was kind of, yeah, it's like written through rose-colored glasses. And I did that deliberately because this man is, ever since he passed away, as much praise and love as he gets, he's also been, a human piñata online. And people are pretty disgusting. And like some of the comments that I got, that weren't necessarily directed at me, but him, were like, people would post a lot of like suicide memes. And they think that's,
Oh, wow.
that's
Crazy.
that's what I meant. I
Yeah.
got nasty, nasty things with the book. And, for as many people that say they love him, I also did learn after this experience how misunderstood he was, and that the quote unquote fans really didn't realize the kind of person he was. Like, one person said, oh, so, Cobain was a social justice warrior, LOL. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, did you read the liner notes I think it was Incesticide, where he's like, if you hate women, people of color, if you know what I mean, if you're in any way, homophobic, I can't think of what he said exactly. He was like, do us one favor, like F off, don't come to our shows, don't buy our books. So yeah, so I just had a lot of people claiming, like, one review that I got, like the person in like the first part of the review calls himself a huge Nirvana fan, and then the second part of the review he's like ragging on Cobain, and I'm like, which is it? So I don't know. It was an experience, we'll call it that. It was an
Yeah.
experience. It was something else. I'm glad I did it, and I wouldn't change it for the world. And I'm not going to let, a minority of, people who just want to spew their hate on the internet stop me from doing me. I'm just, not going to pay as much attention next go around. I don't know if I'm going to put the book back out. I mean, people are emailing me like asking where it is, where did it go? If I do, like I said, I'll probably self-publish it. In the meantime, if anybody's listening and wants the book, all they have to do is email me and I'll send them a free PDF copy of it. So
Awesome. All right, then. Hey, this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to get this episode out. And I wish you good luck on all your future endeavors.
thank you so much for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
That's a wrap for this episode of Bright Brainz, where curiosity meets conversation. If you enjoyed the ride, make sure to follow, rate, and review the show. It helps more minds find their way here. You can keep up with me on Facebook at Bright Brainz Podcast, on BlueSky at brightbrainzpod.bsky.social, and last but certainly not least, Instagram at bright_brains_podcast. And remember, that's Bright Brainz with a Z. So check me out for behind the scenes content, episode updates, and more thought-provoking discussions. Stay sharp, stay curious, and I'll catch you next time. Keep that brain bright.